The American Revolutionary War is an often oversimplified affair. In truth, the motivations, ideas, people, and events are complex in ways that most high schoolers don't have the patience nor interest to learn about. For some, however, this was in fact simple. For some, this was a war for freedom from the Americans. This is their story, and the story of one of the communities they would come to create. As you're most likely fully aware, war has a way of changing things. When the 13 colonies stumbled their way to declaring independence, they found a central story to rally around. They were to free themselves from the British imperial yoke. They certainly fought for political independence, but many mistake this as a fight for freedom. While some may have indeed done it for their personal freedom, only a small number truly fought for the concept of freedom, and these people include the escaped slaves. Early on in the war, in 1775, one Lord Dunmore, governor of Virginia, made a proclamation that the colony would go under martial law. He also added an extra bit that would make quite the splash.
And I do hereby further declare all indentured servants, negroes or others appertaining to rebels, free, that are able and willing to bear arms, they joining His Majesty's troops as soon as may be.
The British had considered doing this for a while, but they weren't sure of the consequences to slaveholders in their other colonies as well as loyalist slaveholders. When Dunmore found himself outnumbered, he decided to set forth the policy, forcing the British to continue since they couldn't exactly retract it. This proved to be a successful tactic nonetheless. Not only did it weaken the Virginia rebels' economic capabilities, but also was a way to boost the British's numbers. As previously stated, this started the larger British effort of not only recruiting rebel slaves, but also try to take any who wished to escape. Possibly 80 to 100,000 slaves went behind British lines. Not all of them fought for the British, but a great number of them did. Those that did often had "Liberty to Slaves" written on their clothes. They also fought in many battles, one of the most well-known units being the Black Brigade of New Jersey, initially led by Titus Cornelius, also known as Colonel Ty. The Black Brigade was an exception, however, since the mass slave exodus was mostly harmful to the southern colonies. These places were much more dependent on slave labor, and so this mass escape had a devastating impact on the south, and contributed a lot to Britain's relative success in the region. In the north, although the impact was certainly felt, it was not as disruptive. As all of you know, the British didn't win this war, and when time came for them to follow through with their deal, they did. In certain cases, depending on how you interpret their promises, and depending on the day you were taken in by the British. Some slaves were kidnapped by rebels and loyalists to be put back to work, some, though a very small number, were sent back by a commission set up by the British, and some were simply taken by military units or high-ranking officers to do forced labor. Thankfully, most of these men, women, and children were set free in various places, over 3,000 of them to the colony of Nova Scotia. Slavery was still very legal in what was left of British North America, including this colony. However, these people were definitely free. But, despite being free of bondage, they still were not satisfied, and understandably so. The aforementioned presence of slavery, which only got larger as more white loyalists also immigrated to Nova Scotia, were concerned that the presence of free black people might make their practice of slavery seem inhumane. Also, the British government did not give these so-called black loyalists, a term which I'm not a huge fan of, the same, if any, provisions as they did for white loyalists. A lot of these problems mostly stemmed from an underestimation of how many loyalists would actually go to Nova Scotia. This isn't to justify anything, since black people were disproportionately negatively affected by the allocation of resources. These issues would continue for the foreseeable future. That's not to say that they were doomed. David George received a bag of potato seeds from a sympathetic white family and was able to produce 35 bushels, enough to feed him and many in his community. A blind Methodist preacher, Moses Wilkinson, received aid from an unknown benefactor and put it to good use as well. In this suffering, we find perseverance. These conditions were awful, certainly, but never underestimate the African spirit. Due to these and many other injustices, the new black Nova Scotians created their own society and communities. Escaped slaves from the US, especially during the War of 1812, Maroons from Jamaica, as well as slaves freed in Nova Scotia would join these communities. In 1832, the New Horizons Baptist Church, later renamed the Cornwallis Street Baptist Church, was established under the direction of Richard Preston, an escaped slave from Virginia. This is sometimes referred to as the Mother Church, since it was often the center of social activity. Black Nova Scotians contributed greatly to Canada's war effort during the First World War. The No. 2 Construction Battalion was the second ever black battalion formed in British North America, and the only one that would serve Canada during the First World War. The first black officer, and the only black officer to serve during the First World War in the Canadian Army, was part of this battalion. The officer's name was William Andrew White. They would play a pivotal role in Canada's civil rights movement as well. Notably, Reverend William Perley Oliver was crucial, founding 4 organizations that fought for equality and being a pastor for the aforementioned Mother Church. In modern times, black Nova Scotians live under vastly better conditions. The legacy of historical inequality weighs heavy, but that only makes their sense of communal spirit and pride stronger. Recently, in 2021, a member of this community unveiled a flag to represent them. The flag, which is the one I'm showing to you now, has seen wide acceptance. I think it looks great. If you wish to learn more about this community from people within the community, then I highly recommend you check out the Black Cultural Center for Nova Scotia, their website or their YouTube channel. They celebrate the history and current traditions, and their content was very helpful for this video. With that said, see you next time.